everyone, welcome back. If you're new here, I'm Katie, and today I'm doing my very large February reading wrap-up. February only has 28 days in the month, and I have no idea how I did it. I know I had a lot of books that needed to get read, but I also wanted to kind of mood read since I've been very much a mood lately. And so I listened to a lot of audiobooks in between. I ended up finishing 39 books in February. I couldn't finish one more to make it an even 40, could I? No, I pretty much read to the end of February pretty much. But 39 books. So grab a coffee, grab a tea, grab a water. I have water next to me because it's going to be a very long video. I will leave the stats to the end. That way, if you just want to hear about the books, we'll just talk about the books. And if you want to know about all the stats, how many pages I read, what lists I got to knock off books off of, then stay tuned to the end. Let's get our DNFs out of the way. I don't count those in my 39 books that I read. And so that way I don't forget to talk about them because sometimes I forget to talk about it, especially since I kind of forgot to write down the DNFs. I did kind of forget, so I better do that quickly as well because I kind of forgot. So the 3 books I DNF'd were Darling Girls by Sally Hepworth, which was a NetGalley arc, but the main character, I was just like, really? This is not that great. And it might have been a good story, I don't know, but the main character, I was gonna say, what's a nice way to put it? There's no nice way to put it. But the main character sells her body to make money, and she doesn't really care about it. So I don't know if it's a redeeming story. I didn't go past the first chapter. So I was like, no, just not for me. So no. Next one that I DNF'd was called The Ministry of Time by Kellyanne Bradley. And I wanted to read it because it was a time travel book. I love time travel books. This one was a no-go. I think I actually got quite far. I think I got about 20% in. But I was, number one, I was bored. Very slow-paced. I'm like, I'm not going to put myself through this. Even though it was a NetGalley arc. I'm like, I'm just not going to put myself through that right now. It's like, nope, ain't happening. All right, then the last one is actually a series that I DNF'd, and I'll talk about, because I did finish the first book, but I decided to just stop reading the Finlay Donovan series by El Casamano, because in the second book called Finlay Donovan Knocks Him Dead, there was just a lot of innuendos. And the first one had a few, but this one just right off the bat, the first couple chapters, there was just so much, and I was just like, yeah, I wasn't gonna go through it. I was like, nope, a lot of innuendos, I'm not gonna deal with it. If it was one every 5 or 10 chapters, maybe I could get through it. But I was like, nope, it's not happening. And I didn't enjoy the first book, as much as the rest of the world did. So I was like, I'm fine DNFing this series. I don't want to read it. Plus, if you guys don't know what DNF means, it just means did not finish, which just means you put it down and you're not going to pick it back up. Unless you say soft DNF, which means it just wasn't the right time. But I very rarely have a soft DNF. I will let you guys know, but I very rarely have books like that, if ever. All right, so those are the ones I DNF'd, and I can put them now into my books that I DNF'd list, because I do actually have a list of that in my app that says books DNF'd in 2025. So that way I can let you guys know at the end of the year what I DNF'd. I only found about half the books to talk about so far. We'll find the other ones when I get to them because the pile's gonna fall if I pick any more. So we're gonna start with the mainstream fiction and then talk about the Christian fiction at the end, like I always do. And I usually go by star ratings, which I totally forgot to do. So I had to go back into my reading journal and do the star rating system thing. Thankful for Goodreads right now, because that way I can keep track. Okay, so the first one is The Guest by B.A. Paris. I gave her another chance because, I did really love her first, 2 or 3 books that she came out with. But this one, I think it was, again, just another slower paced book. Let's see. Yeah, I really enjoyed the ending of the story, even though, honestly, to me, I really can't remember what it was about. I'm really also not a fan of the whole family drama storylines. There was also like multiple affairs happening in the story. They weren't really described in the story, thankfully, but I was more invested in the actual suspense parts of the story rather than the drama, and I really honestly I don't remember much about it. Yeah, so it only ended up being 2 stars. It was my lowest rated book of the month, probably my least favorite of the month, only because I really don't like family drama stories. And there are some authors, very few authors, that do a family drama story really well. I don't think she's really one of them. I've read 2 of them that were more family drama driven, and I didn't really like either one. So she's just not it for family dramas. Next is The Quit List by Katie Bailey. I gave it 2.5 stars. This one was supposed to be a clean, closed-door romance. It was for the most part. I did like the hero of the story. I liked he was a bartender turned like outdoorsman field guide, and she was kind of on the hunt for her ever after. And he's like, well, I'll try to help you kind of narrow down your ideal list. So they kind of go through her quit list on what, she shouldn't keep on there. And I really liked that part, but I really wasn't invested in the characters. I didn't like the female character very much. And there was one scene where she sees his backside in the shower, and I'm like, that to me would not be considered a clean romance or a closed door romance. And it was on the Swoony Awards list, which is supposed to be for clean closed door romances, which it was. There was no love scenes in it or anything. I was like, really, I didn't need that. But other than that, I would have given higher if I actually enjoyed the story, but I really didn't like the female character, and it's just very kind of more of a slower paced story. Now we're getting into that Finlay Donovan is Killing It by Elle Casamano. So I gave it 3 stars, which is not terrible. It's not terrible. There was a few swear words throughout. So I think that's why I soft DNF'd it like last year, the year before, because there was swearing here and there. There was a few innuendos, not as much as the second book. That's why I decided to quit the series. But I was really interested in the concept of like an author kind of talking about her book, talking about the murder mystery she's writing, and somebody overhears her conversation in the restaurant thinking, oh, she's a hit woman. Like, I'm gonna hire this person to kill off my husband. And so I love that idea of the story, like kind of the, miscommunication and mistaken identity trope. I just thought it was a very unique twist on that. And I liked that part. I liked I like the action and I like the mystery and the absurdity of the story. But as I said, there were a few swear words throughout and a few innuendos. But as I said, not as much as the second book. But overall, just an average 3-star rating for me. Next is From Below by Darcy Coates. I gave this one 3 stars. And I do really love her writing. I really did like, though, the setting, as it's one of my favorite settings, which is underwater, kind of thriller adrenaline rush story. So it's underwater, and this team of divers goes into like an old ship that disappeared. And it is more of a... I would say more, it's more on her like similar to like the zombie stories I read. It's not really a ghost story, I would think, but like these, so the crew and everybody, I guess, went missing, and the whole boat, and they found the boat, and so they go in to dive into it, and like all these mysterious things start happening. And we're also following the past timeline, where we're following kind of like the few days before the ship sunk and what happened, what was going on with the ship and the crew, some mysterious things going on. And it got very creepy, but I like creepy. Not super like, but I do like a good adrenaline rush. And I love the underwater setting because like it's almost like claustrophobic feeling. So if you're claustrophobic, you might not want to read it. Next, we're going to House of Glass by Sarah Pekkanen. And it was between 3 and 3.5 stars. But the main character got more worldly and changed her views at the end. And I was like, it was really good, really clean, no swearing or anything. And 80% of the way through the book, the main character completely changed her view. And I'm like, why is that in the book? And there was a female kiss at the end. And I was like, that did not need to be in there. It's like, why change the character 80% of the way through the book when she's a divorced woman and 80% of the way through the book, and it was like 80 to 85% of the way through the book, and so I was like, the rest of it was really, really good, and there was some slow parts in it, but I really loved the reveal at the end. It was really good. So if I wasn't 80% of the way through, it probably would have been a DNF, but I wanted to know kind of the mystery aspects of it. So in this book, we're following a woman. She works with the government to help children who are in a divorce situation where when the parents divorce, she's kind of tasked to figure out who the kid should have be in custody with. And something happens where the girl she has a case with, the girl's nanny is thrown out of the window. Well, it's apparently now a cold case, and so she's trying to figure out what's going on. And what I really liked about this was it was very interesting how when she went to the house, there was no glass. Everything was plastic, plexiglass, non-breakable. And she's trying to figure out, why is everything plastic? And the husband said something like, oh, my wife, she's terrified of glass because of what happened to the nanny when she went through the window. And she's like, no, there's something more going on, because there's like literally no chandeliers, no glass in the picture frames, nothing. And so, the little girl, she's been mute because of this incident. And so I really loved that aspect of the mystery. And the ending was a letdown. Aside from the reveal, I did like the reveal, but yes. So next book is a cozy mystery starter called Needed to Death by Winnie Archer. And it's just a cute title for me. I gave this one 3 stars. It's the first book in a bread shop mystery series, and just the cover is so cute. And I needed a book for a prompt that started with my initial, so K for needed, because it's bread dough. Needed instead of needing something or whatever. So I give this one 3.5 stars. And this one is set around Yeast of Eden, which is a Mexican bread shop in town. And so this girl goes and decides to take like a bread making class, or she accidentally gets involved in a bread making class there. And something happens where one of the people who is in the bread making class ends up getting murdered. And so she's trying to figure out what's going on. The prime suspects are the sisters who own the bread shop as well. So then the main character, Ivy, decides to try to solve the murder. And I thought it was very cute. I don't really remember a lot about it, so it must have been more of a slower paced cozy mystery. But I did enjoy kind of like the sisters who owned the bread shop. They did say they were descendants of witches, but like they weren't doing anything. They just said it, but they were just, making bread. They weren't, talking about doing anything or whatever. And that's why I didn't DNF or whatever. But as of a cozy mystery, just kind of more of an average rating. I give a lot of cozy mysteries average ratings. Some are really good, some just more average. So just an average cozy mystery. Will I continue the series? I don't know. I'll see how book 2 goes. We'll see how it goes. I do love the bread aspect and the bread shop. Next is Veins of Darkness by, I gotta get close to my reading journal, Elizabeth Drysdale, and I gave it 3.5 stars. I did a reading vlog with this one and a couple of other books. This is I honestly thought it was more of a Beauty and the Beast retelling, but it's honestly a lot darker than that. It was a clean romance, but we're following a woman who, her father, I guess, had like a contract with this guy in a castle, and he pretty much sells his daughter to the guy in the castle, saying, well, I don't really want to go there, so I'm just gonna sell off my daughter for the contract. So she's trying to figure out what's going on. There's like a creepy presence in the castle, and she's trying to figure out, what's so mysterious. Why is there only, two servants in the castle and this guy? And she's like trying to figure things out. There's a little bit of romance, and then his brother and his brother's fiance decides to visit, and boy, are they, a piece of work. But then, yes, so it does get a little bit more of darker themes, but I did enjoy it overall. I did like kind of the mystery surrounding this dark castle. Next is a clean romance called The Golden Goal by Anna Conwell. I gave this one 3.5 stars. It could be closer to 4. This is a hockey romance set with a kind of a enemies to more, but the main guy character like has already been in love with the female character like his entire life, but he's like teased her and everything, so she always felt like he was her enemy. So she wanted nothing to do with him, but he's been in love with her since forever. So he is a huge hockey player and she is a physical therapist. So he gets her hired to be on his team to be the physical therapist. And I just thought it was very, very sweet. I'm intrigued to continue on with the series. I love the hockey setting and the enemies to more. I just thought it was really, really sweet. Next is a duology I read from Darcy Coates. One was called House of Secrets and then House of Shadows. And I think I put these actually opposite. I think House of Shadows is the first book in the series. So I gave the first book 4 stars and the second book 3.5 stars. I really enjoyed the first one. It's about a woman who, her family has had money troubles. They lost their ship at sea. And so they're pretty much destitute now. And he's like, listen, we gotta try to get money somewhere. So somebody at the opera house saw her and said, listen, I will marry your daughter and then I will help you with your funds. So she's like, I don't even know this man. Like, why am I being requested to marry him? But she decides, listen, I need to help my family. So she ends up marrying him and moving into this very disturbing house. And I would say this one's a little bit more of a ghost story. I would say it wasn't. Her ghost stories, as far as the ones that I've read, haven't been super ghost story. Like there's a little bit of a ghost story, but like I'm more invested in the characters and the storyline more. But in this one, she goes to this manor where I think it's his aunt, is not a nice person at all. And all these mysterious things start happening where like he's unable to leave the house. He goes into the woods and like comes back like all scraped up and stuff, like he's been in a battle and stuff. And she's like, what's going on? So it was very interesting. I do love like her kind of intense writing style. So I really enjoyed it. The second book kind of continues on, but I felt like the second one was just, I don't know. I think I would have preferred it if it was a standalone because the second book was just kind of meh for me. Like, I don't think there needed to be a sequel. I would have honestly been okay if it ended on a cliffhanger and didn't continue on. Like, kind of one of those open-ended stories, I guess. Next is Cinder Luna by, it's hard to see when they're printed. Cinder Luna by Marie Soleil. This is a Cinderella retelling, sweet, clean romance, and I just really enjoyed this one. This is about kind of video gaming, which I used to video game quite a bit growing up. I used to play Sims and Mario Karts and Indiana Jones and all the fun stuff, but I haven't honestly played a video game in like a really long time. I kind of miss Mario Karts, I'm not gonna lie. I really miss Mario Karts. And Sims too. But anyways, so this woman is a video gamer slash like video game creator, and she has moved away, and she kind of finds an apartment because she can't afford one. So she finds these two girls where they're like, hey, we own like this bakery shop, like you can live upstairs as long as you come help and work with us. Where they're like the evil stepsisters of of the bakery crowd. Like they're so bad. So they pretty much treat her like garbage just so she can live rent free in the apartment. And she has been friends with this guy on the internet for like years and years and years, and just as like a video gamers. And so she ends up running into a guy on a train, and they share a kiss after the train ride. And she's like, well, I'll never see him again. Well, he's a video game kind of company owner, and he befriends her, and come to find out that maybe her friend from the video games is closer than she thought. So it's very, very cute. I really enjoyed that one. Next is Spies Don't Fall for Their Asset by Meg Easton. I gave this one 4.5 stars. I don't know what it is about spies, and it's a great time for me. I love a good spy story. So the main character, she watches spy movies with her friend, and like, wouldn't it be great to be a spy in real life, And so she goes on a blind date, and even though she hates blind dates, but she goes on a blind date, and he's pretty much absolutely awful. And she's kind of, like pretty much fed up with the guy, in front of her. And so there's a spy who is working with an asset in the restaurant. And he kind of overhears the conversation going on in the background. He's like, do you need help? And she's like, not normally, but yeah, I kind of do. So he decides to help her, and she ends up kind of getting mistaken for an enemy asset, like I think the following day or the following week. And so they kind of get involved that way. And she's like, I am no way a spy. And he's like, yeah, but you need protection because you got mistaken for an enemy asset. So I really loved the sweet romance and the spies and the action. It was just a good time. Somewhere Ever After by Courtney Kiesel or Kiesel. I really enjoyed this one. I gave it 5 stars. Could almost be 6 stars if I'm being honest, but I just loved it. This is book 1 in Falling for Summer, and they're all by different authors, which I always hate that. Like, if you love the first book and it's by an author and you're like, I want more from that author in the same series, and then it's like, oh, there are different authors in the series. So, but I really enjoyed this one. I read it because it had a beach on the cover for a prompt in one of my challenges this year. So I just grabbed it on a whim, and I'm glad I did. I really enjoyed this one. This is about a woman on the hunt for love, using pretty much every trope in the book. So she's like, well, I was going to say, like, I don't think she uses the enemies to more. I don't think so. But she just kind of like goes around trying to like date all the guys in the town because she wants to stay in her town. She doesn't want to move, so she wants somebody who is going to stay in the town. And so she's like, I'm going to date myself around the town using different tropes. And I just thought it was so funny and so sweet how she was like kind of using all the tropes. And then like this guy who is her best friend's brother, he comes back to town because he is a famous pro golfer. And so he comes back to town kind of recuperating after surgery and get back into the game of golf. And she's like, I want nothing to do with him because number one, he's my sister's best, or my best friend's brother. And she promised her that she wouldn't, date her brother because that's pretty much all her friends wanted was her brother growing up. I just dribbled. So they kind of like precariously, become friends. They're a little bit kind of enemies to lovers because, I don't know, just there was this like, no, I don't want, to be in love with this guy because he's not going to stay in the town because like he's a pro golfer. He travels. He's not going to want to stay in this small town. And he's like, gee, my best friend or my sister's best friend is kind of grown up and I really like her. And so it was super cute. I also really liked the fact that in this book, the main male character, he was more shy about public signs of affection, which I really liked. You very rarely see that as far as like a man in a book, even though I feel like there's a lot of men out there who don't show signs of public affection. And so it's really nice to share in a book that, guys can feel that. So I really, really appreciated that there was a different kind of personality that we don't see in books. But I really enjoyed it, and I loved that he was kind of pretty much like throwing every one of her tropes out of the book. And I was like, because she's like, I want these tropes with the man I love, not realizing that he's like pretty much every trope she ever wanted. All right, on to the Christian fiction books, which there are quite a few. So, all right. The first one is a short story collection called Legendary Havoc by many different authors. So this is like a short story collection where I guess every year they put like a bunch of short stories together into one collaboration. It has a bunch of stories like from myths, legends, and different stories. Now, I will say I gave this one 2.5 stars. There were some excellent stories in here, I will say. There was ones that I really enjoyed that were kind of more along lines of like the fantasy type stories. Trying to find ones that I really enjoyed. There was one called Heart of Madness by Erin Artfitch, which was like an Alice in Wonderland retelling with like a girl who like was had like PTSD, and she was like, there was like, she didn't like glass, and she saw like the like a deck of cards on the table, and like the Queen of Hearts was like moving. So I really enjoyed that one. And there's a couple other ones in here that I really enjoyed. But I will say that even though this one is supposed to be more Christian fiction, I don't really honestly saw hardly any faith in it. And it could be because a lot of it is, fantasy based. So sometimes it's harder to tell. But I will say I gave it a lower rating than 3 stars because a few of them were kind of headed more towards, well, not more towards, they were definitely mythological retellings. And I'm like, that to me would not be in a Christian fiction collection. Like, it was definitely like, like Greek gods and goddesses and stuff. And there was a few stories in there that I was like, I don't honestly think these should be in this collection. So for me, that's why I gave it 2.5 instead of my usual 3 for short story collections, or 4. Sometimes I get 4. So yeah, I didn't really enjoy those stories, but there were a very select few in here that I really did enjoy. So those definitely were, the highlight of the book. But yes, so for that, it didn't get a super high rating and probably not stay on my shelves. Blood of the Stars by Karen Norton. I finished this huge chunker. Thankfully, I had an audio for it, but this one, it was like, I don't even want to know how many pages, 670 almost. I don't think it needed to be that long. I really don't think it needed to be that long. It could have been an easy 350 pages or so. I ended up giving this one 2.5 stars. It was just, to me, the magic system, I was very kind of confused by. I didn't really enjoy the magic system all that much, and I don't know, the writing style was just not for me. And it's very rare that I find a fantasy book where like I don't connect with the magic system. Like, I usually know the magic systems pretty well, but this one, I don't know. And in this book, we're following Eliana, and she's been kidnapped as a child, and there has to be something to do with her blood, where her blood can kind of, I don't know if it necessarily cures or like it gives longer life or something, but like she's been used by these 2 people who kidnapped her, and she has no idea who her family is. And then she runs into the prince of the kingdom, who kind of is like kind of the rogue prince, because he goes off on his own to sail the high seas and stuff. And I just felt like there was too much going on in this book and not much happening, if that makes sense. Like, I felt like there was more settings than things going on. Like, we're following high seas, then we're going into like the deep forest, then we're going to here, and I was like, I just really didn't connect with this book. And like, once I was done with it, I was just like, I don't remember really anything happening in this book, so it just wasn't for me. I think other people would really enjoy this book. It is very, very, I would say, almost high fantasy as far as like a YA age fantasy goes, because of like the magic system and the politics and stuff. I would definitely say this is more high fantasy than anything else, but as far as continuing the series goes, I don't think I will, because they are a good big chunker. So, but it was nice to try a new fantasy series. Father's Vow by Chris Madej Schmidt. This is a mystery, love-inspired book set around a wildlife preserve where there's a constable who is a widower, and there is a new vet who takes over the reserve to take care of the animals. And something is going on where there is vandalism happening at the reserve, and because there is like this company that wanted to buy them out, and that didn't happen. And so he's trying to figure out what's going on. So he and the vet end up kind of working together to kind of stake out the animal reserve during the middle of the night, and then they strike up a friendship and a little bit of a romance. And I really did like the widower's daughter. I thought she was so sweet, and I also really liked the ending. I thought the ending was super sweet, and kind of the reveal of who was behind the vandalism, I just thought that was so fun. And so I did enjoy that. I just think for me, it was just kind of a meh romance. Like, there could have been a little bit more to the romance, but I did really enjoy the mystery aspect of it and kind of figuring out what was going on. I thought that was lots of fun. And the daughter. I loved the daughter. I thought she was so sweet. Next is Ronnie by Jennifer Lynn Carey. This is part of the Weather Girls Wedding Shop and Venue series. I think this is book like 4 or 5 though, I think. And I'm not sure if I will continue the series or not. I'm not sure. But I did really like this one. I gave this one 3 stars? 3 stars. I think it's because I liked the characters, but I really felt that the maturity level was not there for the 2 main characters, especially the female. It was Ronnie and Carlitos. And I just feel like Ronnie was kind of more immature, which I can understand because this is actually more of a, I would say, upper YA book, because the main character is like, they're pretty young. I think they're like right out of high school, if I'm not mistaken. And so like I think because they were high school sweethearts, and I think she's like 17 or something. And something happens where she breaks off the engagement to the love of her life, Carlos. And her ring won't come off her finger. Her finger's swollen, she can't get it off. So she ends up spending Christmas time with her family, and her family's like, what's going on? What's happening? She's like, I just can't get my ring off, it's stuck. And she doesn't want to say and spoil Christmas, hey, I broke up with my fiance. Well, he is actually being deployed. He got a letter from her after she left, and he's like, what's going on? Like, why is she breaking up with me? And I'm ready to leave, to go into the military. Like, we gotta solve this before I leave. And he's got a broken arm, so he decides to go to where she is and try to figure out how they can fix it and what's going on. And I just really, really liked that storyline. I just felt like the female character was a little immature, especially for me being, up in my 30s. But yes, so I did really like the storyline though, and kind of how it all wrapped up. But yes, so it was a sweet contemporary romance story. The Difference Between Us by Sherry Izek. I actually really like this one. I gave it 3.5, but it could be closer to 4 stars. I really like this one. This is about a married couple, which I love, kind of like a second chance married couple story. I love that. This is about Kate and her husband Adam. And Adam is pretty much a workaholic. So Kate has been staying home, taking care of the kids. They're both like, one's in like upper middle school, and the other one's kind of just hitting middle school, I think, or upper elementary school. And she's kind of lost. She's like her husband Adam is pretty much working himself to death, and she's like, he's not spending any time with his family. Like, his family's not, the number one priority anymore. She feels that way. He feels like he's stuck at work because he works for this big contracting company that's trying to build a casino. And like, they're hitting blocks left and right. Nobody wants a casino in the area. He's trying to figure out where to put the casino. And then he's, struggling with work. He's trying to, get promoted so he can have more money for college and whatever. And something happens where like everybody in the town's kind of against the contracting company, and he is kind of tasked to do community work to kind of say, hey, our company's not that bad. So he decides to work at a community center to help this guy with his taxes. Well, he ends up working with Jimmy, and Jimmy is kind of has the mentality of like, I don't remember what they say, like a 5th or 6th grader. So he's trying to help him like take care of his funds and stuff. And he thinks it's a job for only like, the day or a week or whatever. She's like, no, this is like a 3-month ordeal. And he's like, I can't do 3 months of community service, but he decides to do it. And just, I loved Jimmy. I kind of love the way that he just kind of has that childlike mentality, but also is outspoken and like willing to, tell it how it is. And I think Adam and his wife Kate really needed that. And I just really liked the story, and definitely seeing like the more destitute side of the town, especially since Kate like had no idea like what was going on the other side of town. She knows it's dangerous, but she really didn't see what was going on down there and how the people were being treated and what was going on. And so I really enjoyed this book. I thought it was really good. The Root of the Matter by Lynn Basham Tagawa. This is book 1 in the American Puritans series, and I give this one 3.5 stars. I really like this one, and this is about a company that's set in like, I think it's like 2050 something, but something is like happening where like there's a traveler that's supposed to go back to where Roger Williams goes with the colony from England to America to escape the king. And so this was a very interesting story. I love the historical time period and stuff. I love that there was like a time traveler that couldn't go into the past because he didn't pass his theological test. So she is tasked to go with another guy to go back into the past. And there's a little bit of a romance, but it's definitely more um towards the historical timeline, along with like the faith journey of the main character Geneva, because in this timeline in like 2050 something, Christian is pretty much outlawed. And so she's not a Christian, and so she goes back in the past to kind of learn theology and see kind of, how John Williams, or why did he, leave the Church of England to go to America, and kind of like try to make a thesis statement out of the life back then. And so she had to live a day-to-day life, living the life of 1630s, which is a long time ago and a lot of hard struggles. Now, I really loved the storyline, but I will say there is a lot of, I would say, day-to-day tasks, because we are seeing history and stuff. And I just felt those parts were kind of more slower paced. So that's why I only got 3.5 stars instead of a little bit higher. But I would be really intrigued to see what happens in the next book. Lady of Disguise by Melanie Dickerson. This is, I believe, the last book in the Daracot Tales series. And this is a Jack and the Beanstalk retelling. I gave it 4 stars. Really enjoyed this one. This is just such a sweet story. It's about Louisa, who dreamed of finding supposedly a giant's treasure that her father, I guess, spoke of. And so she goes off to try to find the treasure because, like, I think her aunt and uncle are trying to marry her and her sister off. And her sister's really young. Like, I'm talking like, I don't know, 12 or 13 or something. And 12, yeah. And so she's like, well, I am going to go ahead and leave and escape my aunt and uncle to try to find some money to help my sister. So she leaves and runs into one of the brothers from, the whole storyline, because all the brothers are in the stories. But she runs into a knight, Sir Charles, so goes along with her on her journey. And she is dressed as a boy, so that way she's safer on the roads. Well, he sees right through that disguise. And so he's like, I'll, protect her and keep her on the road and stuff. And I really enjoyed it. And yes, I can't wait for my next Melanie Dickerson book, but I really enjoyed it. The Unraveling of Emmeline Dulaine by Lindsay A. Franklin. This is book 1 in the Riven Leah Sphere series. And I really enjoyed this one. I gave it 4 stars. This is a book about books, and I just love that. So we're following a girl Emmeline, and she saw her sister Camille vanish in front of her eyes. And so she's been to psychiatrist, and she's like, I know what I saw, but she kind of just gives up on that because, people are thinking that she's, nuts. And she's like, I don't want to deal with that anymore. So she kind of stops talking about it until one day when, like, something happens where there's a portal to a fantasy land, and like a small dragon appears in her room, and she's like, what is this thing? Like, this is fantasy. What's going on? And so I'm not gonna spoil anything, but there's like definitely like the books to books. There's travel through books. You should read it, but it's just really good. And I will say, my friend did have a hesitancy about picking this book up because of the way the book cover is. It does kind of look like a crystal ball. It's not, okay? It's not. I don't want to spoil anything, but it's a sphere. It's a sphere, and it has to do with stories. So it is not a crystal ball. But, she was hesitant because of the cover and stuff, which I totally get. But I did really enjoy this one. I can't wait to pick up the next book once it comes out. An Honorable Deception by Rosanna M. White. This is the last book in the Imposters series. This follows the brother from the first books, Lord Yates Fairfax and Lady Lavinia Hemming. And I won't spoil anything, but I will say I enjoyed this book. I gave it 4 stars, but I wanted more of the brother. It was more set around Lavinia, and I'm like, I just wanted more of the brother. Like, I loved the brother from the first 2 books, and I was like, I just wanted more of his point of view, and I'm like, I didn't get that, which was kind of sad. But I did really still enjoy this one. Lavinia is, she's kind of been a child who had an illness, and so she kind of wasn't able to be with her friends all that much growing up. And she discovers that her friends are the imposters, which are a group of people who kind of go around solving mysteries. And she's like, I want to be involved in that. And I really like that part. I love the romance. But as I said, I would love more of the brother. The Nature of Love by Toni Shiloh. This is the 3rd book in the A Love in the Spotlight series. This is about one of the men in the friend group from the previous books. This is the kind of the dad of the group because he's the oldest of the group and he's kind of like the last man standing as far as romance goes. And I love this because it was an older generation romance. Well, not super old, but I mean like, 40s. It's nice to see a 40 generational romance. But we're following Erica, and she's an orthopedic surgeon, and she's 41, and she's like, I'm not going to find love at this point. I'm just kind of, I have my great career and everything, but then she meets Christian Gamble, who is a passionate wildlife conservationist, and it goes from there, and there's a sweet romance. Something happens with Erica and her sister where she ends up getting custody of her two nieces, and so she's struggling to kind of, figure out what it means to be a single parent, and our main character Chris kind of helps out with that. And I just really, this was definitely more of an emotional read from Tony Shiloh, but I really did enjoy this one. I love the characters. I love the two little girls and just their kind of friendship to more story, and kind of them both helping out, trying to discover romance along with discovering how to be a parent as well. I reread 2 books this month. I reread Brand of Light by Ronnie Kendig because I need to continue the series. So I read Brand of Light, and I also read the next 2 books in the series. So we're getting there. But I did really enjoy this one. This is the first book in the Drossarin saga. And first time around I gave it 5 stars. This time around I gave it 4 stars. Only because I feel like there's some parts that kind of go over my head a little bit, especially listening to the audio a little bit quicker. I'm like, it just kind of goes over my head just a little bit. But I do really enjoy the characters, especially Marcos. I really love Marco. Like, is he a new book crush? I don't know, but I really do love Marco in this series. He's kind of like a bounty hunter type of character, and like him and the girl Kiersey, they have a mark on their arms that they were kind of born with, and which kind of connects them in a special way. And it's got like sci-fi political war going on in this entire series, and I'm really enjoying it. So I'm on book 4 now, which I'm really excited about. I binge read the entire series of American Royalty by Grace Hitchcock. I love this woman's work so much. She's so sweet. And I love her work. So I finished My Dear Miss Dupree, Her Darling Mr. Day, and His Delightful Lady Dahlia. By the way, thank you to my friend Jamie for sending me, I think it was this one. This one. So, Her Darling Mr. Day, because I enjoyed it. Actually, this was like tied with book 1 for my favorites. But I love this series. I gave book 1 5 stars, book 2 5 stars, and book 3 4 stars. So overall, really enjoyed it. Actually, wrong way. That's book 3. There we go. But overall, this series is fantastic. I loved it so much. In each book, we're kind of following interconnected characters because we're kind of following the men that are in the first book, kind of sprinkled throughout the whole series. But I loved it. I love this series. If you like Jen Toronto and kind of just like historical rom-com mixed with mystery, and it was just such a good time. It was a really, really good time. I don't know what I can say without spoiling like every single book or whatever, but in the first one we're following a girl named Dahlia, not Dahlia, sorry, this is Willow. Dahlia's in the 3rd book. Willow never thought she would have to marry, but her father is retiring from his business, and the business is kind of like, well, if you don't marry, we're not going to really trust a woman to run the company. So she kind of goes on the hunt for a bachelor, and there's 30 potential suitors. So this is kind of like a historical redone of The Bachelor. I was here for it. And the second one is kind of more of a, let's see, I was trying to think. I guess this is kind of like a second chance romance or unrequited love. That's the trip with this one. It's unrequited love, and it was so sweet, and I really enjoyed this one. And then the 3rd one kind of has like a Phantom of the Opera storyline. So it's about a woman, Dahlia, who's kind of like the new prima donna, and there's like the Phantom of the Opera who kind of makes a little trouble of his own. And this is an age gap romance. The last book, His Delightful Lady Dahlia, this is definitely an age gap romance. I would say like she's in like her early 20s and he's like probably in his early 40s, I'm guessing. I think that's about right. So, I mean, that was the norm for back then. You gotta think back then, that was the norm. So, age gap romance, but I really did enjoy this one. Dereliction of the Heart by Hannah Hood Lucero. I really enjoyed this one. This was part of Sons of Vigilance series, and I think they're like interconnected standalones. Don't quote me though. But I do want to check out more of this series. And actually, kind of funny, I read another book by her this month, and I saw one character from this book and the other book, and I was like, these are two different series. Like, it's kind of cool. So they're all kind of interconnected in like the same universe. So in this one, we're following Claire, and well, somebody stole her innocence and she ran away, and she was supposed to get almost engaged to a man who was in the military, and something happens where she runs away and she has been hurt, so she leaves, and she doesn't come back until years later when she gets a telephone call that sends her racing back to her hometown with her young daughter. And she doesn't want to come home because, you know, things happened in her past that she doesn't want brought back up, and so she decides to go back. And this also follows Declan, who is an Air Force para-rescue jumper, and he decides to come home as well. And he's pretty much a confirmed bachelor. But when he gets to the airport, he was injured during a mission. And so he pretty much gets the last rental car because their flight got canceled. And so he kind of runs into Claire and her daughter. And he's like, listen, I got the last rental car. It's only a 2-hour drive to where you're going. I'm going to the same place. Surprise, surprise. But she's like, you know, should I trust a stranger? Because she's pretty much like stranger danger. Like, she wants nothing to do with strangers, like especially men. And so she decides, well, how else am I going to get there? So she decides to trust him and head back home. And then the past, of course, creeps up. Where did this daughter come from? What's going on? And so it is very heartbreaking. I will say there is trigger warnings in here because of that situation, if you know what I mean. If not, just leave a comment and I'll try to say it. But it was very, very emotional. But her characters have such a strong faith journey. There's a salvation story in this book, and as well as her other book too that I'm going to talk about. But I just really, really love her faith and her characters. So good. I gave this one 4 stars. It could be closer to 5 though. Never Forget the Truth by F.D. Atkins. This is book 3 or 4 in the Truth series, book 3. So I kind of read them out of order. I'm going to go back and read the other 2. So I can't really tell you much about this one. It's a political thriller set in the future that is probably very reminiscent of nowadays as far as political thrillers go. But I really enjoyed this one. And they definitely need to be read in order. I will say that. So it was my fault. But I didn't have time to read the other ones, and I was like, oh no, this is book 3. So, but I really enjoyed this one. Definitely has a very strong faith element, kind of like, I would say this is almost like a end times book, because it kind of talks about like the direction the world is going and the dangers and stuff. And I think this is set in like 2050 as well or something like that. But I really, really enjoyed this book. I loved the faith content. I loved kind of like the thriller aspect of it. Really, really enjoyed this one. So I gave this one, I think I gave it 4 stars. Yeah, but it could be closer to 4.5. Next, I finished, this is book 2, Dawn of Vengeance in the Jocelyn Saga by Ronnie Kendig. I read book 3, but not until March. So you'll see that in my wrap up. But I thoroughly enjoyed this one. I actually gave this one 4.5 stars as far as the enjoyment of the audiobook and everything went. This one, we're following again the bounty hunter Marco, and I really liked the romance in this story. I was kind of saddened how book 1 ended, but like for some reason the romance in this book kind of just worked, and I don't know how to say without spoiling anything. Like, some people didn't end up with who you were expecting, I guess. But I really am kind of glad it didn't. But I'm kind of sad to see how it's going to go, especially with like, there's kind of like a prophecy going on. I'm like, how is that going to work out for both Marco and I can't think of the female main character's name from the first book right now. It starts with a K. But I just really have been enjoying this one. Book 2 has definitely been my favorite so far. And book 3 was pretty good. I'll talk about that in my March wrap up. But I did really, really enjoy book 2. So far, I think book 2 might end up being my favorite one in the series. I reread A Noble Disguise, or A Noble Masquerade by Christy Ann Hunter, because my friend Celestria was going to do a live stream for our Christian book club, and it was that book, and I was like, I can do that. I read it last year, and then I realized I forgot everything, so I had to re-listen to the audiobook. But I still gave it 5 stars, really enjoyed it. Very kind of fun, historical rom-com / with a little bit mix of suspense and action. I just had a good time. So we're following a girl who has been, ever since she was little, when she struggled with something, she always wrote it down in a letter to her brother's best friend without actually sending the letters. And without actually like knowing her brother's best friend. Well, her brother's best friend in the future is kind of posing as the butler. She has no idea because she never met him, or met him when she was very, very young. And so he accidentally on purpose, because he sees who the letter is written to, and he sends the letter to the supposed best friend, which is obviously him. But then she's like, you sent the letter? Like, are you kidding? And so I loved it. I loved kind of like him reading the letters, knowing that, you know, it's him, but like she has no idea. And it was just so sweet. And he's there kind of like on a spy mission of his own. It was a great time. I love that book. I read A Liar's Winter by Cindy K. Sproul's. Another 5-star read. I love her book so much. And this was sent to me from my friend Joanne. I think that might be in a Facebook group. But I love her books so much. And this one, we're following a girl named Lokiel. And Lokiel is, she has a red wine birthmark on her face. And so she's pretty much treated like, you know, she's cursed. She has a mark of the devil. She was, you know, with this family who pretty much kidnapped her from birth. And they are absolutely terrible and rotten to her. Her brother is pretty much like on her path to kill her. And I was like, oh my goodness, like this poor girl, you know? And so she's kind of like on the run from her family, and she runs into this stranger who rescued her from that situation when she was running away in the woods or the mountains or whatever. And so he takes her in hand, and, you know, he shows her kindness and love and, you know, what it means to actually be human. Like, her family was absolutely disgusting. And so just seeing love and kindness through him and through God's eyes. And I loved it so much. It was so good. So good. Another one to knock off my Cindy K. Sproul's list. I think I have 2 more books by her. And I'm going to be very sad when I finish her backlist, because her books are just amazing. Last but certainly not least, the books I gave 6 stars to. And technically the one I'm going to share with you was, I listed it as 5 stars. Let's just put it as 6 stars. I keep thinking about this book and I'm like, no, it is really close to 6 stars. So this one's called Hazel Atlas and the Doorway to Ur by Lily Spencer Kane. This is book 1 in a series called The Chronicles of Emuna. But I thoroughly love this book. I mean, I enjoyed every 500 pages of it almost. But I loved this one. It's about a girl and her brother. And Hazel Atlas, life changes after an accident that her and her brother were in. She was thrown from the path of a swerving vehicle. And so she was miraculously spared with very little injuries. Her older brother, Emmett, though, is not so lucky. And so she wakes up from this and she discovers a key lying on the ground with her name engraved on it. And she's like, this isn't mine. Why does it have, Hazel Atlas, that's definitely a name that you don't mistakenly find on a key one day. But she's like, what is this? And so she's kind of on her own journey. He's also on his own journey, dealing with the backlash of what happened to him, a very tragic accident. And so he's trying to rediscover who he is because of this accident. And she needs to find out where this key goes. And so it sends her to a doorway and into a realm of new possibilities. And she's kind of, I don't want to spoil anything though, but this is very much a heavy based book on spiritual warfare in the physical sense, because it is a fantasy and it's more on the physical sense of actually fighting off evil spirits and spiritual warfare. And it's just very, very good. And I really, really enjoyed it. I thought it was excellent. It was written really well. I love the fantasy aspect, but also like having real world situations going on, and it was really really great, and I cannot wait for the sequel of this book. I don't know when it's coming out, but I have a feeling I'm gonna love it. I read book 1 and 2 in Woman of Midtown series by Elizabeth Camden, While the City Sleeps and When Stars Light the Sky. I enjoyed both. I have book reviews for some of these books, so I'll link the playlist down below. But these two were really good. This one, we're following a dentist a female dentist, and something happens where she discovers a deadly plot from a patient in her chair. And so she kind of befriends a cop on the beat. And so he's, he has a dangerous job, so he really doesn't want to, have a romance. But then, of course, there's a romance with the sweet dentist, and it's a Friends to More story, and I just really enjoyed this one. I thought it was really, really good. Then we have When Stars Light the Sky. This one is on the cups of World War II, and Inga is a German immigrant, and she travels back to Germany working for the U.S. Embassy. And it's kind of seeing kind of the aspect of how the U.S. Embassy handled like hundreds, if not thousands of people a day trying to get their passports or get their, papers to be able to go to the U.S. before World War II broke out. And so I really love that kind of interesting aspect, seeing within the eyes of the U.S. Embassy. So I really enjoyed this one. And the romance, it's kind of enemies to more for this one. I don't know why I'm telling you tropes. Apparently I'm in a trope mood. The Glory of Light by Hannah Hood Lucero. I loved this one. It was so good. Oh, the faith content. There's also a salvation story in this book as well. Actually, more than one. So, but I really enjoyed this one. This one was so good. So in this one, we're following a girl from New Orleans, and she is captured by people in Syria. And there's, how does she escape? She ends up, finally getting integrated back into society after that dangerous mission that she was on. She's in the military, and something happens where she's hired by the CIA to work in her old hometown in New Orleans to kind of integrate herself as a student at the local college. And her old best friend, her foster brother, is there as well. So she kind of has an in at the college and stuff. And her foster brother's best friend kind of likes her. And I like this one. This was an opposite age gap romance. She's like 27 and he is like 20, 21 or something. But I think it worked in this book, honestly. I really loved both of them. I loved kind of they were both kind of, I would say they weren't strong-headed and strong-willed, but I kind of worked together in such a faith-strong story, and I really enjoyed it. And all the action heads right to New Orleans, and it was really good. I loved the faith content, and yes, really great characters. She has fantastic characters. She might end up being a favorite author of mine. Like, her characters are just so good. Line of Fire by Taylor S. Newport. This is a new favorite for me. This one, we're following an Australian mercenary named Tyler Reed, known as the Ghost of Oz, because he's off the radar. He has like no background, and yet he's kind of tasked to work with different government agencies, and a group targets a CIA asset because she's creating a revolutionary drug to kind of help the military out. Well, there's also this rogue society that also wants a drug, and they're going after her. And so Tyler Reed is tasked to help her out. And it was just really, really good. There was some like surprise and twists and turns I didn't see coming. I saw one, but then I was like, I did not see the other one. But it was action filled. If you love kind of Mission Impossible storyline type stories filled with action, with, honestly, I will say, very little romance. There might be more coming up when the second book comes out this year, but as far as this book goes, there is very little romance in it. So I feel like anybody could really enjoy this one. A great buddy read for you and your hubby or whatever, because it was really good. Grandma Ruth Doesn't Go to Funerals by Sharon J. Mondragon. I loved this book. It was actually my very first book by her. I have her other two that she's written, but this was so cute. I loved it. This is set in a small town amongst gossiping people. Now, I am against gossip as far as like real life goes, but when it comes to a small town in a book, it just hits a sweet note for me. I love a small town gossip group. I don't know why. I just love it. But in this one, we're following uh, of course, Grandma Ruth, and she's bedridden. Well, she used to be in everybody's business. She used to go to every single funeral in that town. And so she tasks her granddaughter, I can't go anymore, so why don't you go to the funerals and tell me all the details, all the, but her grandmother says, I don't approve of gossip. It's called information. So I loved it. There's a sweet romance involved, and I thoroughly enjoyed it. And as a matter of fact, this one's not romance driven. I will say there's not really a romance until the end of the book, even though they kind of try to matchmake her with like the whatever it's called. I can't think of I was gonna say innkeeper, not innkeeper. The man who owns the funeral home. His son. They're trying to pair her up with, but it's just so sweet. And something happens where like there's a funeral that she goes to where the wife is like really upset because there's something that he says before he passed away. His last words to her were really upsetting, and she has no idea what's going on. Like, is he really the husband I married? And so the granddaughter and Grandma Ruth try to get together to try to figure out what's really going on. And it was just so great. I loved it so much. It was such a great story. Then the last book, I'm telling you, honestly, it was really hard to pick a favorite for this month. Like, honestly, any of the last 7 books I talked about, 8 books I talked about with you, any one of them could have been number 1. I chose this one as number 1, though. But it was really hard, honestly. This is A Dream Teller by Katie Shade. This is a standalone Daniel in the Bible retelling, fantasy style. And it was just phenomenal. It was so good. I could not believe. I think this is also a debut novel, I think. I'm pretty sure. And I was like, this is a debut novel because this is fantastic. So in this one, we're following a woman who, Shannon, and she's named heiress to the Megaran throne. And she's given glimpses of the past. That's where the Daniel dreams kind of come in. She's given a glimpse of the past with the power to change the future. And this one has political intrigue. It's got romance. It's got, arranged marriage trope. It's got, everything. It's got like who can you trust type of feels to it, and mistaken identities. And it was just such a phenomenal, strong fantasy standalone book. Like, it's probably one of my favorites that I have ever read. And that's saying something because like lately fantasy books have kind of been hit or miss for me, but this was a 100% hit. I loved it. I thought it was so much fun. And as far as magic goes, aside from like the Daniel dream telling, I don't believe there's any magic in this book. So this is a non-magic fantasy book, and I just really loved it. It was so good. And I will say there's creatures. Okay, if you count, that's not really magical to me, but there's creatures in this book. But I just really loved it, and you need to pick this one up. It was 100% one of my favorite reads of the month, and probably of the year. Actually, a lot of these are probably favorites of the year. More than half of the books I read were over 4 stars, which for reading 39 books, that is fantastic. Now I can talk about the stats for this month. So I did read 39 books. Can't believe that still. So as far as formats go, I read 3 physical, I read 10 ebooks, and 26 audiobooks. Yeah, I could not do that many books with not a huge amount of audiobooks. Then as far as ratings go, I had 3 DNFs, 1 2-star, 3 2.5 stars, 4 3 stars, 6 3.5 stars, 11 4 stars, 2 4.5 stars, 5 5 stars, and 7 6 stars. That is crazy, especially in 1 month, but I mean, that makes sense since I read 39 books. Hopefully some of them were really good. And as far as the genres go, I read 1 historical fiction, 3 fairy tale retellings, which is good since we had the fairy tale readathon this month, which I did really well on. I accomplished all the reading prompts of the Read in February readathon, and with only 2 books, so I did really good. I read 6 contemporary romances, 5 mystery/thrillers, 1 cozy mystery, 8 historical fictions, 11 fantasy slash sci-fi. If I had room, I probably would have split those up because I do like to see how many I've read. Contemporary 2, which means it's not contemporary romance. It's more like just a contemporary, or I would say women's fiction type of story. So 2 contemporary and then 2 romantic suspense. And then as far as like pages goes, I almost doubled my page count from last month. I read 13,559 pages. That's insane. I read 3 NetGalley arcs. I read 8 books off my own shelves. I read 17 review books, 10 library books, and 1 Kindle Unlimited book. So not bad as far as like kind of a mixed bag. All right, so let me know what your favorite book was. Let me know what your least favorite book was. I want to know that too. I never asked that question, but I would love to know. I would love to chat with you down in the comments because your comments always brighten my day. I hope y'all have a wonderful day, and I will see you all in the next video.